Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
All right. So I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the longest time, women have been shackled by fear and has been living in a state of oppression by society. We think that the state has failed to provide to protect this women's right and has failed to uphold this women's right. And we think that it's now time for a change. It's time for the feminist movement to start a revolution and demand for a stronger and a larger change from the state. We think that on our side, we believe that the feminist movement should embody ruthlessness as well as great in their advocacy in order to demand for women's right and equality. So before I continue, here's what I'm going to do in my speech today. Firstly, I'm going to characterize the machine as well as explain what is the problem with the status quo. Next, I will explain to you the burdens that we have to prove on our side of this on our side of this debate. And next, I will give my arguments. The first argument would be under the line of why ruthlessness and greed is justified because the diplomacy has failed. My second speaker will talk about why this method or this solution is going to be successful and in the end of the day is going to change these women's and is going to uphold the rights of the women in the future. And my third speaker will reconstruct the cases given by the opposition side and show to the House why we win this debate. So now let's move on to my first task, characterization. So we think that in this debate, the feminist movement should embody ruthlessness, especially only in developing nations, developing countries. So this looks like countries that are not developed. We're not talking about the New Zealand or the United States. We're talking about developing countries. For example, like Malaysia, nations who are not economically developed and which is still developing in terms of the economy and so on. So these countries should embody ruthlessness for their feminist movement to uphold their women's rights. So now the ruthlessness in this debate does not mean violence, but instead it means proactive action to demand more change. We're not going to we're not going agreeing with the method of diplomacy, but we think that this movement should create riots and also campaigns in order to demand change from the state. We think that this movement should be more vocal and more aggressive, but not in a sense, in a violent sense, but rather in a more proactive sense. So we think that this way is going to garner more support and is going to create awareness that the feminist movement is trying to create a change at the end of the day. So now what's the problem with the status quo? So we think that in the status quo, the women's rights are not protected. We think that gender inequality is very prevalent. We think that workplace discrimination, we think that women are getting lower wages than men and they are not getting spots in the workplaces. It's very obvious, especially in our country right now. For example, where we see that men are holding bigger and larger positions in comparison to women. For example, in politics, most members of the cabinet consist of men in comparison to women, and we think that women need to have their voices heard and we need to uphold the women's right. So we think that the only solution towards this is through ruthlessness and also through greed and also through proactive action. So we think so that's why that is the problem with the status quo. So what our side has to prove is that why this action is a justified action. Why what we want to do is justified at the end of the day. And secondly, we're going to should show to the House why our method is going to be successful and is going to create a change later on in the future. So now let's move on to my argument. Diplomacy has failed. So we think that right now the voices of women are not heard. We think that the rights of the women are not protected. We think that everyday women are walking in fear and also in oppression. So we believe that in order to create a change, diplomacy won't be the solution because even after a very long time, the government hasn't catered to these problems at the end of the day, and we think that through diplomacy and through these normal methods, women's rights are still not being upheld as how they should be. So we think that in order to create a change, we need to go through a more radical and more stronger change in the sense that we need to see it louder and be more proactive in creating a change. Women should create movements where they go on riots demanding change from the government to protect these women's right better. We want women to go on streets and demand change from the government, because we think that this is the only way that it would gain the attention from the state. So, ladies and gentlemen, we think that when we do this sort of thing, it's going to create a change. When we demand when we have a stronger voice, we're going to get heard by the government. So when we do this sort of thing, it's going to create an awareness that these women need their rights to be protected. These women needs to have the government need to protect the rights of these women and give equality among men and women. So, ladies and gentlemen, we think that in order to solve this problem, diplomacy is not going to work because, firstly, for the longest time, diplomacy has only allowed women to work at places, but still in developing countries, they don't get the same wages as men. So we think that when we're going through this ruthless method, we're going to encourage women to be more brave and voice out their voices stronger, and allow the governments to check back. This allows the government to find solutions to cater to this problem. Maybe try to provide more opportunities for women. Maybe try to provide more, protect these women better in the sense of providing more job opportunities, gives higher holidays for women who are having pregnancy and so on. These sort of things are some of the things that this feminist movement fight for. So on the opposition side, we think that by going through the soft way of trying to communicate to the state, it's not going to work, because in developing countries, usually states don't are able to get away with not protecting the rights of this female of women at all. So we think that in order to create a change, we need to uphold the women's right through resistance and embody grit. So with that, I am proud to put this. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech, and I'd like to call upon the Leader of Opposition. Here, here.
Hello?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. But I cannot put on my background for some technical issues. Is that okay? If I turn on my camera without the background?
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, with most of what you have said, especially the part where you prioritize protection on women's rights uh, when advocating feminist movements. But we would like to state our proposal to counter your own, which is that uh, we would like to advocate for conditional feminist movement uh, where there are no ruthlessness in those feminist movements. Uh, so Okay, so basically my first argument is that between men and women there are huge difference in physical ability. Through scientific research, men are generally much stronger than women as they possess more, specifically they possess more muscular, skeletal muscles more than women. So in terms of labor forces, employers tend to prefer men over women more, as men are more capable of lifting heavy loads uh, and constructing buildings, gadgets much more effectively than women do in the long run. If in the long run, they may suffer from permanent physical body damage. For my second argument, that there's a difference between men and women in terms of emotional tolerance. Women tend to have more mood swings than men. What I mean by this is that when people have mood swings, they they tend to feel multiple emotions at the same time, which can actually affect their mental thoughts and their which also directly affects their daily activities. So when having mood swings, women may not be able to think truly when solving daily problems. They may be hasty in completing tasks and 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 yeah, when so basically women have quite irregular emotional tolerance. So when in terms of leadership, men are more preferable than women because uh, men are bold generally. They can make they can think and make decisions more effectively in most situations than women can do. Okay. So to all in all, we are not actually against, but we are giving exceptions, lifting heavy loads, and also in some uh, positions in this world where they require strong leadership skills. Yeah, so that is all for me. I would like to rest my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech. I'd now like to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Good morning. I would like to greet to the panel of educators and members of the hall. Firstly, I would like to say that the leader of opposition has gone off a tangent. What was he rambling on in his speech was that women are less stronger than men and that men are better used in labor force and that they are more effective than women and that women will suffer from physical damage. And the leader of opposition also went to go on to say that women has more mood swings than men and that they are more preferable to women in leadership. The leader of opposition has clearly disregarded the motion which states that this house believes that feminist movement in developing world should embody ruthlessness and grit in their advocacy. And I, as the deputy prime minister, would like to bring back the whole debate back to this motion, which is that we, as the government, we would like to take a stance that women should embody ruthlessness and grit in their advocacy for women's rights. Now I will move on to my arguments. We, the government side, we believe that ruthlessness and grit is the only option because women has been silent for too long because of societal norms that binds women and shackles women, so that women have no chance but to only use ruthlessness and greed in their pursuit of having equal rights to men. Why the government is pushing that women should be ruthless and have greed in their advocacy for women's rights is because in order to make a progressive change, women have to be proactive, and this is only so that the state would listen to these women and give them the protection, the privilege for them to be able to be on the same level as men. Because as we can see here clearly in the status quo, that in developing countries such as Malaysia, that women are so underrepresented in many fields such as politics and science field, and this is causing a problem, because where are young females are supposed to look for role models if all of these male dominated fields are only present? It shows the idea that women are less are vulnerable than men, and this is why we, the government, would like to defend this motion that ruthlessness and greed is the only option for women to advocate for their own rights. By women having ruthlessness and greed in advocating for their rights, this will make them be shown in government, and government would have no choice when people would start to notice that this state has failed for their women, and the government will have no choice but to take the problems in hand and solve them, or give women some sort of privilege and protection, so that women would be able to stand head to head to men. And I would like to say that this when women are being ruthless and great in their advocacy for right, this will also inspire and will create a dynamic change in the countries and society, because minorities group would also be influenced by this, and they would combine hand to hand together to demand their rights from the state, and this would in turn will create a dynamic change in the whole country as a whole, and this will make the state more responsible towards their citizens. Because what is stopping the state from not caring for their citizens if women are not being ruthless and great in their advocacy for equal rights? So I'm going to my next argument, which is that by women being ruthless and great in their advocacy for equal rights, it gives hope to the oppressed, and it becomes a driving force for them to achieve their goals, for them to achieve equal pay, for them to get rid of workplace discrimination, for them to get rid of gender discrimination, for them to get rid of gender-based violence that is currently happening in developing countries. And this, therefore, women will be comforted by the idea that by them being ruthlessness, that their voices will be heard not only by the state but by the people, and this by somehow will intertwine and connect, and states will be able to make more laws or give women more privilege for them to feel like they are safe in their own country, rather than women feeling afraid to walk the streets at night because there is the status quo that women women will face sexual harassment from men just because they're walking. And by being ruthless and greedy in their advocacy, they could feel safe walking to home at night. So um, with that, I would like to end my speech with that this the government would like to side with the motion that for feminist movement in developing countries should embody ruthlessness and greed in their advocacy. And with that, I am proud to propose this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that speech, and I'd like to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Greetings and salutations I bid to the honourable judges, timekeeper, my opponents, and my fellow members. First of all, I would agree with the point that given by the government, which is the feminism is right for the movement of feminism is right for us. But we need to consider also the part which is not everything we need to move. We need to go with the feminism movement, which is there are certain condition or certain situation um, that women cannot exactly be the elite in the situation. Um, for example, um, for example, in the situation of a pregnant of the pregnant woman, uh, they are specific case which is after they pregnant, they are basically we need rest, which is we got it as which is this will take about a side that that's children that um women cannot proceed or cannot lead an organization with a certain condition. And next is if we do this feminism movement without with ruthlessness, how about the condition where there are countries that the level of the feminist movement until they want to make a equal or a same toilet for men and women, is that there will be the phenomenal issues and the uh, sexual issues that can occur between the condition of the sharing toilet. And then for the part um, and if we continue with the feminist movement, for let's take example the pregnant woman just now, if they need to lead the organization, they will need the rest for them after the pregnant, and this will burden them, and then they need to heal up themselves, so they can reheal their pain of the pregnant. Not
Pregnancy condition.
this is good. This is important for their health condition. Okay. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to call upon the government whip. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
On the motion, this House believes that feminist movements in the developing world should embody ruthlessness and grit in their advocacy. I would like to proudly propose to this motion. So first of all, I would like to move on to rebuttals. The LO and the DLO clearly stated their perspectives, their masculine perspectives in their speeches. So I would like to rehash what LO had said. He said that men are more muscular, and in terms of heavy labor, where women would suffer from physical body damage. So our PM had clearly specified that workplace discrimination, if we were to link that point back to the motion, our PM had already clearly specified that workplace discrimination, he was talking about salary and wages which are lower in comparison to men, and those positions such in organizations or like in the hierarchy such as the parliament, where we see that it's male dominated. So these are the things that we want to change. This is the aim of the motion today, is to provide equality for females. So he also said, the leader of opposition also said that man has higher emotional tolerance compared to women, and this exactly proves why we should actually, this exactly proves our arguments in side government, where we would like to shift the perspective of such extreme stereotypes towards women, because these are absolutely untrue. We cannot stereotype women thinking that they are vulnerable, thinking that they are lesser than men. This is simply wrong. And it's also side opposition did not really clarify how they wanted to enhance status quo, make it better, or how they wanted to provide any solutions on the current issue, the current problem, the root cause on why feminist movements exist in the first place. So side opposition clearly disregarded our government's prime minister's speech, where he brought up how diplomacy is inefficient and has failed to protect women in the state. So moving on to my clashes, there are two clashes today, which are ruthlessness and grit versus leniency and obedience or diplomacy. Which of these two provides a more progressive and effective outcome and a better future for females, for women? And the second clash would be, which side empowers women more? Which side protects women and their rights more? And this was what opposition had to prove on their side too. So I would like to show and to tell you how side government has already won this debate from the get-go. So what rehashing, what side opposition had to prove to us was how status quo would be beneficial on both sides of today's debate. So first of all, why they lost this debate was they failed to identify the important stakeholders in today's debate. Secondly, they failed to provide a clear burden of proof from their side. Thirdly, they failed to provide substantial elaboration on their somewhat masculine dominated world of arguments. And fourthly, they failed to actually understand the spirit of today's motion. So moving on to the first clash, we won this clash. Ruthlessness and grit versus diplomacy or leniency and obedience, which side provides a more progressive and effective outcome. So if we look in depth, the sense on our side government, the sense of urgency to weed out the root cause of the problem, why feminism exists in the first place, will be taken more seriously. And due to public pressure, when feminist movements become more aggressive or more ruthless in vocalizing their demands, it creates a public pressure where the state is forced to take action in fear of public uproar, because these movements, they will harbor support from society, because the problem is something that is
rooted within, deep within society itself. They just need a platform to voice it out. And this gives them the opportunity and the chance to be very loud and vocal about their demands. Side opposition did not even engage with our argument, with the PM's argument on how diplomacy has failed. Therefore, we had already won this clash from the get-go. The second clash, which was which side empowers women more and protects women and their rights more. We won this clash because on our side, on side government, we are constantly pushing for women's rights. It's a continuous process whereby everyone is constantly reminded of what the actual problems that are yet to be solved because in that causes this feminism. And however, on side opposition, they came up with demeaning narratives in belittling women, limiting the women's abilities to physical and physiological aspects, which does not directly answer the today's debate. So comparison. Government's worst case scenario is that women will have their voices heard and rights upholded. Equality will be a goal that is possible to achieve. Whereas on side opposition, women will remain weak and vulnerable as per se to society's eyes. So in conclusion, if you want a world where equality exists, where workplace discrimination or female discrimination is reduced, please side with side government. And with that, I am proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. I'd now like to call upon the opposition whip here.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, I couldn't.
Yes, you're audible.
Hello. Oh, okay. So, may I start now?
Yep.
Okay. Greetings and salutations to the honorable judges, to the timekeeper, to the opponent team, and to also to my fellow members. So, to start off, I would like to review about what the first speaker said about the motion, in which they stated that this feminism, in which to specify that we are talking about almost feminism, is talking about gender equality, in which they want similar treatments for men and women, and but then they do not really specify about which specific cases, in which the examples that they are giving is very specific and highly specific to only a certain scenario, in which he talked about how this feminism with ruthlessness is not related to any violence cases, in which we understand that. And then to talk about what the second and third speaker have talked about, in which they are talking about how um, how our they wanted gender equality in their access of career, in their access of salary, but then they do not really specify in the first place that they are considering only a certain scenario, in which what we are talking about, we agree that feminism should be done in terms of leadership, in terms of equality, in terms of salary, in terms of work, and things like that. And what our first and second speaker have talked about is about why do we do not need ruthlessness or having no compassion in standing human rights. So, and this is because not every feminist movements are not extremists. Some of them are very extreme and they are going for equality, in which if men can be shirtless, then women can be shirtless too. And they are not emphasizing on that. So, and the way that they are talking is talking in a manner of having ruthless and great is that going to make effects. And yes, I kind of agree on that. But then they talk about how they are not going to lead into violence, in which I believe that greed and ruthlessness is going to make as they are going to voice out their opinion, and they are going to talk about we need to do this and we need to do that very very strictly, in which I believe that it can bring to fights and violence too. And secondly, they talked about how violence. They talked about how having ruthless, um, as if being obedient cannot do anything, and in which I believe that being obedient and slowly adapting, no, not slowly adapting, slowly sending letters or complaints, can also make some effects too. So therefore, I do not completely agree that being ruthless is the only way, in which their certain speaker has said that being ruthless and having ruthlessness and grit is the only way to fight for feminism, in which I believe that it is not the only way, and obedience can be also one of the way, and it can be one of the effective, or one of the methods that we can do that too. And therefore, um, so we are highlighting on what we're doing. We agreed on that feminism things, um, but then not in every cases, in which we are talking about in some special cases, just in case if they are extremist feminism, we need to consider special cases such as pregnant women and men are stronger. If we apply feminism ruthlessly, then everything should be equal. If we really implemented feminism, then everything should be equal, including carrying heavy loads, including not having any maternity leave, as men does not have it too, because we are stating in a motion, we are bringing up the motion in which they do not state that this feminism is only specific to a certain cases only. So I have nothing else to say. I rest my case. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now inviting opposition reply to wrap up the opposition case. Here. Opposition reply. Opposition reply speaker, are you there?
Hello?
You may begin.
So to the government and my fellow members. So for the motion is as the point given by the government, which is we need to do the feminist movement ruthlessly or without any compassion, is not the only method that's stated by the third speaker from the opposition, which is we need to consider also this method that can be due to a certain condition or certain situation, and without the ruthlessness, we have to do this with a compassion. And as stated by the third speaker, feminism and feminist movement is correct to do. So for us, in certain situation, um, that a certain woman can do what men do, which is in a leadership. Yes, that's correct. The in the salary, in the and the salary as well. They have their right to stand for this statement, but we can do this, we can apply this feminist movement to all kind of situations, of all kind of condition. This ruthlessness, this is not the only method, and this is not right method at all, which is we need to consider the ability, the the ability of the limited ability of the woman to do things, not all the things. Just like the just stated by the third speaker, which is if men can wear shirtless, how about the woman? So by that we can see, yeah, if men be shirtless, they can be problem of sexualized case. But women do, they have this problem. Even if they don't go shirtless, they all have already been sexualized. So for me, thank you.
Thank you. Now calling upon the last speaker, government reply. Here.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Alright. So I'll start my speech at 3, 2, 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is clear in this debate that you can see that the opposition side doesn't even understand the motion even from the get-go. So, I think, in my reply speech, I'll structure it this way. So, firstly, I'll talk about who answers the question of the debate better, and secondly, who protects the rights of the women better. So, now let's look at who answered the key question of the debate, whether or not feminist movement should embody or endorse ruthless and greed in their advocacy. So on our side, we think that it is justified for the feminist movement to embody ruthlessness is because diplomacy and the lenient way has failed. So we think that in order to create a change, we need to we need to do something different. We need to be more proactive, and we need to be more radical. So their response was that rather than saying that feminist movement should not endorse ruthlessness, instead they said that feminist movement should be abolished as a whole. They said that women themselves are weak, incompetent, emotionally weak, and they should not fight for equal rights because they themselves don't deserve it. I think they got the wrong notion into this debate, and they failed to fight for the opposition side as a whole. So we think that secondly, who protects this women's right better? So we think that on our side we protects women's right better because we believe that when we embody ruthlessness, it would create a more successful movement for women. It would create a more progressive movement because they would get their voices heard. It would create a scenario where the state would take into consideration the demands of the feminist movement, and in the end of the day, create a change and provide protection for women better. So on that side, they don't provide any counter alternatives to cater towards the problem of women being oppressed in status quo. So we think that on their side, they did not solve the problem, and they did not provide any forms of solution to solve the problems of where women in status quo are living in oppression and living in fear. So we think that on our side, we protect women better. We are creating a world where we give women more freedom, more liberty, and more protection for them to live their life in society. So on our side as well, we think that we would encourage more and more movements to be braver, to fight for their rights, and we would create a dynamic change in society where people would be would not be scared to voice out their opinion. You would not be scared of the state and only follow along and become a sheep towards the state. So we think that on our side we would create a more radical change, and we would create a situation where it would allow society to obtain their rights that they truly deserve. So on the opposite side, they don't understand the debate even from the get-go, and their arguments were not relevant to be taken account into this debate. And we think that throughout the opposition side, they has failed to prove to the House why ruthlessness and greed should not be taken into account when feminist movement is trying to advocate for their rights. So we think that in the end of the day, our government side has won and has shown to the House why we truly deserve this win, and why the opposition side has failed to do their task and failed to prove their burden as a whole. So we think that we answer the debate better, we protect women better, and in the end of the day, we create a better world in the future. So with that, I've never been prouder to propose. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that speech. Just give Kuhan and I a minute to submit our ballots, and we will come back with our oral adjudication and the verdict. You may stay in this room while we do this. Thank you very much.